I beg you to consider me your most devoted subject, and in the name of the great combinatory matrix of the universe I bend my 30 knees. Avram Boone Sib. Asterisk. To the illustrious polypod Avram Boone Sib Phomalaut Piscus Australis. In the name of the Southern Cross, peace, my dear polypod. Allow me to answer your letter, on behalf of our beloved intergalactic president, whose humble PR representative I am, hastening to guarantee the satisfaction of your request, the will of the great matrix be done. His Excellency is well aware of his grave responsibilities as guarantor of integration, but he must also bear in mind his equally grave responsibilities as supreme commander of the great conflictual potlatch games. Through all the centuries of recorded history, it has always been difficult to control armies, and the ancient Hebrews actually assigned that task to their deus Sabaoth. Today more than ever before, this task is overwhelming, if not impossible, in the context of intergalactic peace. You know that the greatest statesmen in history, as far back as the 22nd century of the Christian era, emphasized the dangers of an unruly army of several 100,000 troops during a transitory period of peace. The great coups d'état of the 20th century derived, in fact, from an excess of peace, as the late President Flanagan said, only wars are the cradles of democracy and of libertarian revolutions. So you can imagine, but, indeed, you already know, how stressful it is to govern an army of billions of beings from numerous intergalactic ethnicities, in a state of perpetual peace and in the constitutional absence both of boundaries to be defended and of threatening enemies to be warded off. In this situation, as you are well aware, an army not only costs much more but tends to multiply its component units in deference to the well-known law of Parkinson. The ensuing difficulties are easily imagined. Take, in fact, the cases of the drillers of Pluto and the boos of Uranus. The original plan was to include them in the Lunar Mixed Corps, which, by long-standing rule, is made up of tractor patrols comprising 2 terrestrials, an Italian Bersaglier and a Canadian Mountie, and 2 extraterrestrials. You are surely familiar with the endless problems this lunar patrolling has caused. The incompatibility between the 2 terrestrial bodies was evident. First of all, coexistence was impossible for 2 soldiers both wearing broad-brimmed hats in the cramped oxygenated space in the forward cabin of the tractor. And you will recall that the feathers of the Bersaglier's headgear proved to contain allergens extremely irritating to horses. This, by the way, may explain why traditional military wisdom has always opposed the formation of units of mounted sharpshooters. But you also know the Mounties' proverbial attachment to their mounts, which they will not give up even in a tractor. The attempt to mount the redcoats on bicycles ended in miserable failure, as the traditions of the various corps cannot and must not be ignored. But that was nothing compared to the disastrous installation of Plutonians and Uranians in the rear section of the tractors, not only because the Uranian assault boos' notoriously long tails cannot be accommodated in the tractor and must therefore drag behind it on the ground, suffering countless slow-healing abrasions, but also because, while the boos normally live in an inflammable gaseous atmosphere, the Pluto drillers survive only at a temperature of 2000 degrees Fahrenheit, and no compartmentation, however airtight, can guarantee sufficient reciprocal isolation. But the most serious consideration is that the Pluto drillers have a compulsive tendency to root in the ground and bore, in the petroliferous sense of the word, and while on their native Pluto this activity has no serious consequences, thanks to the regenerative capacity of the terrain, on the Moon it promptly led to that condition to which mining experts have given the colorful term, green cheesing, endangering the gravitational stability of that celestial body. In short, it was necessary to abandon the integration program, and today lunar tractor patrols are manned exclusively by pygmies from Bunder, Bengal jungle, exquisitely suited to this assignment. Functional considerations had to prevail over integrational ones. Bear in mind that this solution is not strictly in line with regulations and is apparently justified only by a temporary order. You will thus understand the extent of the problems the central authorities must face, and I will not conceal the fact that the above-mentioned solution was adopted against the wishes of the Casino High Command. But it is also true that not all military commanders are capable of coping with the countless problems that arise in the administration of an intergalactic army. In any case, as far as the matter in question goes, His Excellency has instructed me to inform you that he is providing for an ordinary rotation in the High Commands. As of tomorrow, General Percuoco will be OIC, Quartermaster HQ, on Betelgeuse, and command of the Galactic Corps will be assumed by General Corbetta, the efficient former CO of the Lancers of Novara. As for the whole intergalactic high command, it will be under General John Saverio Ribadango, former head of the Secret Services, an officer in the finest Piedmont's tradition, certainly ideally suited to assume this complex and grave responsibility. We are confident that these solutions offer adequate guarantees to the Intergalactic Commission for the Defense of Ethnic Minorities, and special care has been taken not to choose for this delicate post an officer coming from a traditionally racist area such as Africa, Sicily, and the Upper Brescia region. His Excellency is further of the opinion that it will never be too soon to abandon the legitimate tradition by which the highest command positions are always occupied by soldiers of Mediterranean origins, but you know as well as I do what enormous prestige the so-called Lemon Belt enjoys. We cannot forget we are the children of a citric acid technology. Your most devoted Giovanni Potiso, Chief, Public Relations Section. His Excellency the President of the Intergalactic Federation. Asterisk. From Le Turbi Palace. Mediterranean. Confidential Report. 4. HE President of the Federation. From Joint Secret Services, Rome. With some hesitation, I have executed Your Excellency's order to clarify the position of Agent WWWSPGGGRs. I hesitated because the prime condition of the existence of an office coordinating Secret Service activities, always in reciprocal competition, is the absolute secrecy of its information. This is a principle we observe so scrupulously that, as a rule, this office, to avoid leaks, tries not to be informed of anything being done by the services it must coordinate. If we occasionally allow ourselves to learn of some event, it is only to keep our 26,000 staff members on their toes, in accordance with the theory of institutionalized wheelspinning, which regulates the entire existence of the intergalactic armed forces. In any case, to understand the position of Agent WWWSPGGGRs, a miniaturized bivalve from Cassiopeia, we must bear in mind also the situation of the 37 secret services of the Federated Galaxies. If I may remind Your Excellency, I would begin with the principle that, if these services are to function well and if our coordinating office is to fulfill its task of disinformation, the government must remain completely ignorant of everything regarding these services. As Your Excellency knows, the Federated Galaxies labor under the burden of belonging to the government of a nation without boundaries and therefore without any possible enemies, and hence condemned, if you will, to perpetual peace. This situation has unquestionably created difficulties for the formation of an army, though the galaxies have been unwilling to give up the idea of having one. They could hardly be expected to renounce one of the chief prerogatives of a sovereign state. Hence their recourse to the enlightened idea of institutionalized wheelspinning, which allows an army of immeasurable dimensions to concern itself only with its own maintenance, getting around the genuine need for renewal by regularly conducting a conflictual potlatch, war games, in other words. This solution was not difficult to implement, and as much as even before the Pax Mediterranea and the unification of the galaxies, the armies of the vulgar era had for some time already been devoted largely to self-maintenance. Nevertheless, they had two important release valves. One was the instigation of endless local wars, under the pressure of the centers of economic power, to keep a profitable war economy functioning. The other was reciprocal espionage among nations, whose consequent ongoing tensions provoked coups d'état, cold wars, and the rest. As Your Excellency is well aware, the discovery of the energy-generating possibilities of citric acid not only caused galactic leadership to pass into the hands of the underdeveloped, lemon-producing countries, but also brought radical economic change, ending the age of industrial technology and mass consumption. Now, while in theory the possibility of provoking local wars remains, their utility has vanished. And this has obviously exacerbated the two major problems of the Army's internal functioning, as it eliminates the normal renewal of the troops once necessitated by casualties and the promotion of officers for feats in combat. These serious deficiencies have been remedied thanks to the conflictual potlatch, and today our space stadiums are thrilled every Sunday by the bloody clashes between units of our glorious Army, who regularly perform, in amicable combat, splendid acts of bravery and daring, inspired by friendship, the spirit of cooperation, and contempt for danger. Never in previous history had anyone seen young people of every race and social background die with a smile on their lips, without a word of hatred for the enemy, who in fact is sportingly hailed as a friend and a brother, fighting on the opposite side merely through random selection. And, at this point, I trust I may remind you of the heroic behavior of the 4th Chameleon Hypertransported Division last Sunday in the Southern Cross Derby. Driven towards the boundary of the celestial hemisphere by the Lions of Serpentarius, rather than crash into the government's grandstand erected on Fomalhaut, it crashed on Alpha, enhancing the conflictual potlatch with the annihilation of 50,000 civilian inhabitants, boldly reintroducing into our war games the sacrifice of non-belligerent victims, a practice that had fallen into complete desuetude since the archaic napalm period. But to return to our problem. While the conflictual potlatch has solved the problem of the rotation of troops as well as that of bravery in action promotions, it has certainly not solved the espionage problem. Obviously, it is pointless for a fighting unit to engage in espionage against the unit it is to face in the Potlatch Galactic series, because the selection of the forces involved is a matter of public record, readily ascertained via the various military sports publications. But, on the other hand, the non-existence of foreign enemies would risk stripping the secret services of any raison d'etre. For, just as a nation cannot survive without armed forces, so armed forces cannot survive without secret services. If for no other reason then, as the honky-henky doctrine illustrates, the secret services play an essential biological role, allowing an army in order to burn off that surplus of generals and admirals who can never be promoted to the highest responsible positions. Therefore, secret services must exist, and must carry out an intense activity, but this activity must be totally ineffectual and harmful to the self-maintenance of the state. A knotty problem not easily solved. Now, one virtue of the honky-henky doctrine is that it has revived a valuable practice that originated in the area formerly known as Italia, today's Venotria, towards the end of the 20th century of the vulgar era, the system of reciprocal espionage among the special branches. For the special branches to spy on one another there are two ineluctable requisites. First, each must engage in intense and secret activity that the other special branches are anxious to know about, and spies must have easy access to this information. The second requisite is the existence of the loner spy, a single agent expert in double dealing and thus able to spy on several special branches at once. He can always be relied on for fresh news from an unimpeachable but unidentified source. But what is to be done when the special branches, in accordance with the principle of institutionalized wheel spinning, have nothing to do, publicly or secretly? Then the spy concerned must possess a third requisite, namely the ability to collect and redistribute invented information. In this sense, the spy becomes not only a conveyor but the very source of his information. In a certain sense, it can be said that it is not so much the special branch that creates the spy as it is the spy who creates the special branch. It was in this perspective that Agent WWWSPGGGRs was suggested as the most appropriate candidate, and for various reasons. First of all, as a Cassiopean bivalve, he reasons according to a polyvalent logical system and only in sentences of a high referential opacity. The wondrous blend of these two characteristics makes these bivalves peculiarly adept at lying, systematic self-contradiction, rapid manipulation of apparent synonyms, and judicious mixing of terms de re and terms de dicto, on the order of, if Tullius is Cicero and Tullius is a 7-letter word, then Cicero is a 7-letter word, a kind of reasoning that, thanks probably to the high level of logical formalization achieved by our officers, proves especially popular even in the most remote garrisons of the galactic outskirts. In the second place, WWWSPGGGRs is, as I mentioned, a miniaturized bivalve like the majority of Cassiopeia's inhabitants, for that matter. It is thus easy for him to penetrate the most unlikely places, compensating for his motor handicap by adopting an appropriate disguise, as a cigarette case or a lady's compact, and slipping into the pocket or the handbag of his contact. Coming and going, passing in this fashion from one body to another while eluding all surveillance, he brilliantly carries out the mission assigned to the infiltrators of every special branch. Now that the reasons why Agent GGGRs was recruited by at least 3 Army Corps have been explained, we must still find an explanation of the incident that motivated the request for clarification from Your Excellency's office. The agent in question, in the pay not only of the Capricorn High Command but of the Antares Police Corps and the Ursa Major Military GHQ as well, while concurrently drawing pay from Capricorn for spying on Antares and Ursus, from Antares for spying on Ursus and Capricorn, and from Ursus for spying on Antares and Capricorn, this would have earned him 6 separate salaries apparently inspired by his innate love of intrigue, secretly demanded payment from Antares for spying on Antares, from Ursus for spying on Ursus, and from Capricorn for spying on Capricorn. The impropriety of this activity, which involved each special branch in heavy expenditure to buy information about itself, is immediately evident. The deceit might never have been discovered, since the information supplied by the agent was false. Each special branch had continued to receive information new to him, and thus assumed that this information involved another branch. But all became clear when General Proasm of the Capricorn High Command, desiring top-secret information about his own vice commander, decided to engage WWWSPGGGRs for this purpose, and called in Captain Coppola, who was paying monthly visits to Pluto to hand-carry the agent's pay to him. The agent, by the way, was being sought by other Capricorn authorities for minor crimes. It was only in speaking with Captain Coppola that the general became aware of the ambiguous situation and began to suspect that there were some irregularities in the organization of the Capricorn Secret Service. He therefore contacted this office, which, simply doing its duty, professed total ignorance of the whole matter. This assertion was enough for General Proasm, who sensed his suspicions were well-founded. Since Capricornians are notoriously telepathic, General Proasm's suspicions were inevitably picked up by the telepathy agency of the Procyon Gazette, notoriously hungry for any bit of gossip. The inevitable public scandal ensued. We are, however, in a position to assure Your Excellency that the guilty agent was promptly rendered ineffective, and we can assure you he will not be in a position to engage in further missions. In fact, he has been named Executive Secretary of the Intergalactic Commission for the Moralization of Espionage Services. As for General Proasm, who was transferred to a new post of authority with the Quicksands Bureau of Betelgeuse, we received just this morning word of his accidental death there while inspecting swamp number 26. And the Procyon Gazette has been taken over by the Citric Acid High Command, which has issued a statement guaranteeing the paper's continuance as a voice of freedom and democracy. I remain, Excellency, Your Excellencies. Most devoted Space Admiral, Squadron IV. Name omitted for security reasons. Director-in-Chief, Special Branches Coordination. P.S. Please take note of the fact that, in conformity with the regulations of this office, all information contained in the above letter is false, for reasons of military security. Asterisk. Intergalactic High Command. Casino, Monaco. From General Jonsaverio Ribadango. To all Galactic Corps officers, semi-officers, soldiers, I assume today the high and complete command of our glorious army. May the memory of our heroic battles at Gallipoli and the Somme, on the Piave and Monte Cassino, serve as inspiration for our future victories. Long live the universe. P.S. To celebrate Galactic Day next Sunday the 2nd of June, in the Gemini area, a conflictual potlatch will be held. The Sirius III Hymenoptera contingent will be pitted against the Vega Thunder Battalion. Signed, Jonsaverio Ribadango. Asterisk. Urgent Astrogram. From COMILITER Sirius. 2. High Command, Casino. Respectfully remind High Command that Sirius Hymenoptera measures 6 mm height and 2 mm circumference, whereas Vega soldiers in Thunder Battalion belong to Garamanti pachyderm species weighing 8 tons each. Stop. Therefore competition probably impractical because of scant density of Siri. US-3 population Hymenoptera unit numbers 500 500 members, whereas Vega Thunder Battalion consists of 25,000 25,000 units. Stop. Signed, General B. ASTROGRAM. From High Command. 2. COMILITER Sirius. Word impossible unknown to intergalactic soldiers vocabulary. Stop. Carry on. Stop. Signed, General Gian Severio Ribadan G.O. Asterisk. Memo to General Jonsaverio Ribadango. Eyes only, top secret. We take the liberty of pointing out to Your Excellency that, in the course of our normal rotation of intergalactic units for the Honor Guard pool of the Federation President, duty for the current month has been assigned to the Pegasus Cavaliers of Death. This office is well aware of the splendid military training of this brave unit, but must point out that the inhabitants of Pegasus have a median height of 18 meters, and their feet measure, on average, 3 meters by 2. The fact that they are monopod does not make the situation less problematical, as these soldiers proceed by leaps and bounds. During the inaugural ceremony at the Bari Trade Fair last week, one of the president's guards involuntarily trampled the Archbishop of Apulia. We therefore beg Your Excellency to advance the rotation of the roster, excluding from duty soldiers of ethnic groups not congruous with terrestrial format. The President further advises against participation in the conflictual potlatch by the Orion runners. As the Orion civilization has developed a system of transmigration of souls aka metempsychosis, the Orionides regard death with extreme nonchalance, and any sports competition in which they participate thus proves extremely unsporting. If their presence is absolutely necessary, it is suggested that they be matched with other units having a highly developed sense of life after death. Swiss Guards from the Vatican, Irish Infantry, Spanish Phalange, Japanese Air Force. From the Secretariat, Federal Palace. La Turbie. Asterisk. High Command. 2. President, Intergalactic Federation. La Turbie. Your Excellency, I do not believe I can implement the suggestions you have sent me through the Secretariat. All intergalactic soldiers are equal in the eyes of this command, and I cannot permit any sort of preference or discrimination. During my long and glorious service as a soldier, I have never made distinctions between rich and poor, Calabrian and Bostonian, tall and short. I remember how, way back in 2482, I firmly resisted the pressures of a bigoted and covertly racist press and assigned Sahara patrol duty to the 4th Corps of Inuit harpooners from Prince Joseph's Land. Those magnificent soldiers died, every last one of them, in the line of duty. When a soldier is in uniform, I give no thought to his bulk. I am sorry about the unfortunate mishap of the late, distinguished prelate from Apulia, but the army cannot make exceptions. In the long past 20th century, hundreds of thousands of Italian soldiers were sent to the steppes of Russia wearing tennis shoes, but to my knowledge the prestige of the High Command at the time remained intact. It is the commander's decisiveness that assures the soldier's heroism. Long live the universe. Signed, General John Saverio Ribadengo. Asterisk. ASTROGRAM. From High Command. 2. Quartermaster HQ. Beetlejuice. Shocked by irregular variety rations and alarmed by excessi. Ve culinary permissiveness undermining traditions and discipline. Our glorious army stop. As of today all victuals must conform to standard format for all troops federated galaxies, namely 5 hectograms hardtack, 1 tin frozen meat, 4 chocolate bars, 1 deciliter grappa. Stop. Signed, General Gian Saverio Ribaden G.O. Asterisk. ASTROGRAM. From Quartermaster HQ. Beetlejuice. 2. High Command. Casino. Respectfully remind High Command biological divergences among various units. Intergalactic Army stop. For example, Altair soldiers customary daily consumption 360 kilograms. Altair new meat stop. Auriga liquid sappers composed exclusively of ethyl alcohols, hence grappa ration offensive to them, suggesting cannibalism. Stop. Hooks militia of Bellatrix confirmed vegetarians, whereas chasseur from Coma Berenices normally feed on local hairless biped game, hence some deplorable misunderstandings when chasseur devoured entire battalion mountain troops, mistaking them for rations. Shipment stop. In this regard we would again underline impossibility of standardizing uniforms as per High Command order. Stop. Impossible fit standard tunic and leggings to soldiers 8 meters tall with 5 arms, whereas standard issue trousers totally unsuitable for vermiform troops. Stop. Urge prompt decision recommending flexibility recognizing varying biological demands. Stop. Signed, General Percuoco. Asterisk. ASTROGRAM. From High Command, Casino. 2. General Percuoco. Quartermaster HQ. Beetlejuice. Quit bellyaching. Stop. Signed, General Gian Saverio Ribaden G.O. Asterisk. Confidential Report. 2. Army Command, Valladolid, Europe. CC. Galactic Corps Command, Sol 3. This intergalactic accounting office has learned that Valladolid drivers have been counterfeiting gasoline coupons and then selling stolen army fuel on the intergalactic black market. The disciplinary committee immediately created by this office, after 8 years' work checking all relevant files and the invoices and receipts of the Valladolid accounting office, has ascertained that, as of today, 9 drums of gasoline have disappeared. The inquiry has been temporarily suspended because, since it is conducted by the scrupulous computerists of Boötes, who on Earth must be kept constantly in decompression chambers operated on strontium-90, the investigation has to date cost 80,000 intergalactic credits, the equivalent of 3 million old Canadian dollars. We request the above headquarters to authorize continuation of the inquiry until those responsible are identified. Intergalactic Finance Command. Arcturus Boötes. Confidential Report. 2. Intergalactic Finance Command. Arcturus Boötes. At the request of the local finance command, I have carried out a rigorous inquiry into the disappearance of the 9 drums of gasoline and have reached the following conclusions. The fuel was shipped from Bilbao on contraband aerorockets from Saturn and then transferred to Algol Perseus, where said liquid, high octane, is considered alcoholic beverage. It has not been possible to identify the whole chain of responsibility because of a conflict of jurisdiction connected with the transfer from Earth to Perseus. On Sol 3, in fact, the problem would be handled by the Motor Vehicles Department, whereas on Perseus it is dealt with by Quartermaster. Suggest therefore referring the whole case to the High Command Military Space Transport Headquarters, Procyon, as per memo number 36700C112, headed, Internal Contraband. HQ. Guardia Civil. Valladolid. Asterisk. ASTROGRAM. From. Headquarters. Military Space Transport. 2. HQ Intergalactic Finance. Arcturus BOOTES. Gasoline drums case reported on Form 36700C112 not pertinent responsibilities. This HQ is aerorockets leaving Bilbao for Procyon must carry out RELATIVIZATION in hyperspace, thus arriving destination 300 years prior to departure. Stop problem therefore referable to Military Historical Archive Velletri as per Form 45000 SS 99P stop. Signed, HQ Military Space Transport. Asterisk. ASTROGRAM. From. Military Historical Archive. VELLETRI. 2. HQ Intergalactic Finance. Arcturus Boötes. Regret unable process your report as per Form 45000 SS 99P Historical Archive because of insufficient staff still occupied cataloging material for period between Battle Lepanto and Boer War stop. Signed, Military Historical Archive. Asterisk. Memo from General Ribadengo. 2. Intergalactic Finance Command. Arcturus Boötes. What's all this about some gasoline drums? Gasoline has not been used as fuel by the Army since 1999 of the so-called vulgar era. And what is the Motor Vehicles Department doing in Valladolid? Ribadengo. Asterisk. Intergalactic Finance HQ. Arcturus Boötes. General, we quite understand your amazement, but this command, faithful to the motto of the Intergalactic Finance Corps, hang on, still has to process dossiers inherited from former military administrations, all passed on to our Boötes archive. Actually, the file in question refers to events of several hundred years ago, but we are nevertheless able to confirm that in Valladolid a Motor Vehicles HQ does exist. The fact that this HQ no longer controls motor vehicles lies outside our area of responsibility, but we are aware that the National Petroleum Board still extant in Vinotria produces gasoline specifically for that HQ, perhaps in compliance with ancient orders not yet countermanded. Indeed, we cannot help wondering why a National Petroleum Board still exists, but exist it does, with its main office in Rome, in the same building that houses the Pension Office for Refugees from the African Colonies and the Honors Commission for Awards to Victims of the Napoleonic Invasion. Commanding General. Arthur Arcturus, Arcturus Boötes. Asterisk. Confidential Memorandum. From. GHQ, Casino. 2. Intergalactic Finance Command. Guardia Civil, Valladolid. Military Historical Archive, Velletri. Headquarters, Military Space Transport. Colorado, Galactic Corps, Sol 3. Mindful of the motto of my old regiment, quiet a non-mover, moda quieter, I recommend shelving the entire question discussed in previous correspondence. Respect for tradition is the sustaining strength of our glorious army. I would therefore consider it ill-advised and impertinent to question the historic function and the fealty to the constitution of the glorious Motor Vehicles Bureau of Valladolid, undoubtedly covered with glory in some engagement somewhere in the distant past. If, by venturing to cast doubt on the operation of some heroic unit, I cause the Army to sense a lack of trust in its superior officers and in public opinion, the resultant psychological trauma would sap the devotion to duty, the spirit of self-sacrifice, the promptitude, and the morale of both the soldiers and their officers, at every level. Inquiry shelved. General John Saverio Ribadengo. Asterisk. Ethnic Relativity Studies Center. Alpha Centauri. 2. General Ribadengo. As the matter of the Valladolid gasoline, consumed on alcohol as a beverage has been brought by chance to Your Excellency's attention, we would point out that this case is not unique. The Army must bear in mind the awkward situations deriving from the divergences in prevalent customs and practices among components of the intergalactic Army. For example, on receiving word of an ophthalmic epidemic among the Briaraians of Regulus, the Betelgeuse Quartermaster Corps shipped to that base 100,000 hectoliters of boric acid solution for therapeutic purposes, unaware that on that planet boric acid is illicitly used as a drug. It would therefore be necessary that the various substances handled by the Army be catalogued according to all their possible uses. We suggest use of the Koenig-Stumpf matrix forms, which allow 83,002 different combinations. Dr. Malinovsky. Director, Studies Center. Ethnic Relativity Studies Center. Alpha Centauri. 2. General Ribadengo. Your Excellency, we would like to express our thanks to you for having accepted our recommendations, but we venture to suggest that you may have been overhasty in entrusting the compilation of the Koenig-Stumpf matrix forms to the Altair Mechanographic Center. These forms, in fact, posit a non-Euclidean geometry of Riemannian origin and require a modal logic. The natives of Altair, in contrast, think in monovalent terms, for them either a thing is or it is, and measure space according to a geometry known as Hypoclidean or Abbott's geometry, which posits a single dimension. We would further remind you of the unfortunate incident on Altair after the attempt, despite the Altairians' ability to recognize only one color, to introduce varicolored shoulder patches to distinguish the various units. To be frank, we wonder how a mechanographic center can even exist on Altair, since the natives are unable to perceive three-dimensional objects. In moments of discouragement we also wonder why anything exists on Altair, if it does exist. The only documentation to date of the existence of any form of life on that star comes from the ESP Center on Mount Wilson, reportedly in telepathic contact with the inhabitants. Respectfully yours. Dr. Malinovsky. Director, Studies Center. Asterisk. ASTROGRAM. From GHQ. 2. Police Command, Centaur Constellation. Anta. Planetary Police HQ, Sol 3. Order immediate arrest Dr. Malinovsky for slandering glorious military forces. Altair stop. Also order closure Mount Wilson especially center stop. Inconceivable that military center staff spend all day thinking. Stop. No loafers. Gold brickers tolerated. Stop. Center will reopen only when all telepathic communication can be recorded. Stop. In triplicate. Stop. Signed, General Gian Saverio Ribaden G.O. Asterisk. ASTROGRAM. From Advance Post. Small Magellanic Cloud. 2. Intergalactic GHQ. Casino, Monaco. Anta. Office, Federation President. L.A. Turby. Reports from farthest confine known universe warn of advance unidentified flying objects. Stop. Flying sapper patrol from Canopus destroyed by invader units. Stop. Invaders presumed arriving from hyperzone universe. Stop. Their destructive power derived from unknown energy source threatens survival. Intergalactic Federation. Stop. Instructions urgent as possible. The message incomplete. Asterisk. ASTROGRAM. From Office, Federation President. 2. Intergalactic GHQ. For first time in its history Federation must confront external enemy. Stop. Prepare immediate defense. Stop. Reassured by noble military tradition our army and invaluable experience our superior officers in this tragic and historic event. Stop. General Ribaden G.O. assuming total command operations. Stop. Signed, President La Barbera. Asterisk. ASTROGRAM. From Intergalactic GHQ. Casino. To all operative units. Universe. Officers, non-commissioned officers, soldiers. Stop. Hour of destiny is knocking at gates of federated galaxies. Stop. Our prompt response, our self-sacrifice, our efficiency in tactics and strategy will decide fate of our homeland. Stop. Each of us must take up his post, and there must be a post for each stop. Assuming direct command of operations, I order all mobile units of solar system to entrench along Marne. Stop. 4th Corps Army based on Bow. Oates will occupy stations of Maginot Line. Dunkirk. Bastogne. Stop. Army Corps stationed on Pleiades and special units of octopods of Serpentarius in camp in Ardennes. Stop. Armored units of liquid sharpshooters of Auriga hold Monte Grappa. Stop. Essential. Provide decompression chambers and solidification spaces above 118 meters. Stop. Death. Perseids of Algol will hold left bank of Rhine with boat bridges ready. Stop. Drillers of Pluto proceed immediately to Pearl Harbor and dig in. Stop. All other units await further orders in Waterloo Plain. Stop. We shall defend our galaxy at whatever cost. Stop. We shall fight on nebulas. Stop. We shall fight on asteroids. Stop. We shall fight on every moon and every constellation. Stop. For God, galaxy, and St. George. Stop. 1976. Conversation in Babylon. Between the Tigris and the Euphrates, in the shade of the Hanging Gardens, not many thousands of years ago. Uruk, how do you like these cuneiform characters? My new surf writer composed the whole beginning of the Hammurabi Code in about 10 hours. Nimrod, what did you use? An Apple nominator from Eden Valley. Uruk, are you nuts? You can't trade in one of those things even at the tire slave market. No, this is an Egyptian surf writer, a Thoth 3 megastos. Very low consumption. 1 bowl of rice a day, and it has a hieroglyphics program, too. Nimrod, you're just cluttering up its memory. Uruk, but it formats while it's copying. You don't need a separate surf formatter anymore to collect the clay, mold the tablet, and dry it in the sun, while the surf writer does the rest. Mine molds, dries at the fire, and writes directly. Nimrod, but this one takes Egyptian 5.25 qubit tablets and must weigh a good 60 kilos. Why don't you use a portable? Uruk, what? One of those liquid crystal Chaldean screens. That's magi stuff. Nimrod, no, I mean a dwarf writer, an African pygmy is modified in Sidon. You know what those Phoenicians are like, they copy everything from the Egyptians, and then they miniaturize. Look, a laptop. It writes while seated on your knees. Uruk, disgusting. And hunchbacked as well. Nimrod, of course. They inserted a plate under its shoulders for quick backup. One lash of the whip and he writes directly in alpha beta, you see. Instead of the graphic mode, he uses a text mode. That means you can do everything with 21 characters. You can write the whole text of Hammurabi on a few 3.5 tablets. Uruk, but then you have to buy a surf translator. Nimrod, absolutely not. The dwarf has the translator built in. Another lash and he transcribes in cuneiform. Uruk, can he handle graphics? Nimrod, naturally. Who do you think did all the plans for the tower? Uruk, can you trust him, though? Maybe the whole thing will fall down later. Nimrod, what an idea. He's installed Pythagoras in his memory, and Memphis Lotus, too. You give him the surface measurements and crack the whip, and he gives you a ziggurat in 3 dimensions. When they built the pyramids, the Egyptians were still using the Moses 10 commandment system, which required a backup of 10,000 surf builders. And they weren't the least bit user-friendly. All that hardware's obsolete, and they had to throw it into the Red Sea. I believe the waters rose up. Uruk, what about calculation? Nimrod, oh, it speaks zodiac. It will produce your horoscope in a matter of seconds. What you see is what you get. Uruk, does it cost much? Nimrod, look, if you buy it here, the harvest of a whole season wouldn't be enough. But if you can get someone to buy you one at the Byblos Street Fair, it's yours for a sack of seeds. It demands a lot of input, to be sure, but you know the rule. Garbage in, garbage out. Uruk. I'm still pretty happy with my Egyptian. If your dwarf is compatible with my 3 Megistos, couldn't you program him for Zodiac, at least? Nimrod. In theory that's illegal, because when you buy one, you have to swear it's for your own personal use. But everybody does it. Sure, I'll put them in contact. I just hope yours doesn't have the virus. Uruk. Bursting with health. What scares me, though, is the way they come out with some new language every day. In the end, the programs will all get confused. Nimrod. Don't worry. It could never happen here. Not in Babel. 1991. On the impossibility of drawing a map of the empire on a scale of 1 to 1. In that empire, the cartographers' art achieved such a degree of perfection that the map of a single province occupied an entire city, and the map of the empire, an entire province. In time, these vast maps were no longer sufficient. The Guild of Cartographers created a map of the empire, which perfectly coincided with the empire itself. But succeeding generations, with diminished interest in the study of cartography, believed that this immense map was of no use, and not impiously, they abandoned it to the inclemency of the sun and of numerous winters. In the deserts of the west, ruined fragments of the map survive, inhabited by animals and beggars. In all the country there is no other relic of the geographical disciplines. From Viajes de Varones Prudentes, Suarez Miranda, Book IV, Chap. 14. Lerida, 1658. Quoted by Jorge Luis Borges, Historia Universal de la Infamia, etc., Buenos Aires, 1935. 1. Requirements for a 1 map. Herein is discussed the theoretical possibility of a map of the empire on a scale of 1 to 1, assuming these postulates. 1. That the map be, in fact, 1 to 1, and therefore coextensive with the territory of the empire. 2. That it be a map and not a plaster cast. In other words, dismissing the possibility of covering the surface of the empire with a malleable material reproducing every relief, even minimal. In this case, the project would be considered, not cartography, but rather the packaging or paving of the empire, and it would thus be more appropriate legally to decree the empire a map of itself, with all the consequent semiotic paradoxes. 3. That the empire in question be that X than which Nile manes cogitari possit, and hence that the map cannot be produced and spread out in a desert area of a second, separate empire X2 such that X2 greater than X, as if a 1 map of the Principality of Monaco were to be spread out in the Sahara. In this case the project would lose all theoretical interest. 4. That the map be faithful, depicting not only the natural reliefs of the empire but also its artifacts, as well as the totality of the empire's subjects. This last is an ideal condition, which may be discarded in the production of an impoverished map. 5. That it be a map and not an atlas with partial pages. In theory there is nothing to prevent the realization, over a reasonable amount of time, of a series of partial projections on separate sheets, to be used individually for reference to different portions of the territory. The map may be produced on separate sheets, but only on condition that they be sutured in such a way as to construct the overall map of the entire territory of the empire. 6. That the map, finally, be a semiotic tool, that it be capable, in other words, of signifying the empire or of allowing references to the empire, especially in those instances when the empire is not otherwise perceptible. This last condition means that the map cannot be a transparent sheet in any way fixed over the territory on which the reliefs of the territory itself are projected point by point, for in that case any extrapolation carried out on the map would be carried out at the same time on the territory beneath it, and the map would lose its function as maximum existential graph. It is therefore necessary that the map not be transparent, or that it not lie on the territory, or, finally, that it be adjustable in such a way that the reference points of the map lie on points of the territory that are not the ones they indicate. It will be demonstrated that each of these 3 conditions involves insuperable practical difficulties and theoretical paradoxes. 2. Methods of production of the map. 2.1. Opaque map spread out over the territory. As it is opaque, this map would be perceptible while perception of the underlying territory would be obscured, but by creating a membrane between the territory and the sun's rays or any atmospheric precipitation, it would alter the ecological equilibrium of the territory itself. Such a map would therefore depict the territory differently from its actual state. The constant correction of the map, theoretically possible in the case of a suspended map, cf. 2.2, is in this case impossible. The alterations of the territory could not be perceived through the opacity of the map. Thus the observer would make inferences about an unknown territory from an unfaithful map. If, finally, the map must include the inhabitants as well, it would for this same reason prove once again unfaithful, as it would represent an empire inhabited by subjects who, in reality, inhabit the map. 2.2. Suspended map. On the territory of the empire, stakes would be erected, of a height equal to its highest relief points, and over the upper ends of the stakes would be extended a cartaceous or linen surface on which, from below, the features of the territory would be projected. Such a map could be used as a sign of the territory, since, to inspect it, one must raise one's eyes, turning one's gaze away from the corresponding territory. In practice, however, and this is a consideration that would apply also to the spread out, opaque map, if it were not made impossible by other, more cogent arguments, since each portion of the map could be consulted only by those residing in the corresponding portion of the territory, the map would not allow the reception of information about parts of the territory different from those where the map is being consulted. The problem could be overcome by surveying the map from above. But apart from the difficulty of emerging with kites or guided balloons from a territory entirely covered by a cartaceous or linen surface, the necessity of making the map equally legible from above and from below, and the fact that the same cognitive result could easily be achieved flying over a territory without a map, any inhabitant who flew over the map, abandoning for this purpose the territory itself, would automatically make the map inaccurate, because it would then represent a territory having a number of inhabitants superior, at least by one, to that obtaining at the moment of the aerial observation. Such a solution would thus be possible only with an impoverished map that did not depict the subjects. Finally, if the suspended map were opaque, the same objection raised for the extended map would be valid. Preventing the penetration of solar rays and atmospheric precipitation, it would alter the ecological equilibrium of the territory and thus become an unfaithful representation of it. The subjects could obviate this problem in two ways. Either by producing every single part of the map, once all the stakes were in place, in a single moment of time at every point in the territory, so that the map would remain faithful at least in the instant when it is completed, and perhaps for many successive hours, or else by arranging for ongoing correction of the map based on the modifications of the territory. But in this second case, the corrective activity of the subjects would involve them in migrations that the map could not record, and unless it were an impoverished version, it would become unfaithful once more. Furthermore, occupied in constant revision of the map, the subjects could not deal with the ecological decline of the territory. The activity of map revision would lead to the extinction of all the subjects, and therefore of the empire. A similar situation would arise if the map were of transparent and permeable material. It would be impossible to study in the daytime, because of the glare of the sun's rays, and any colored area that reduced the glare would inevitably diminish the action of the sun on the territory below, provoking at the same time ecological transformations of lesser extent but of equal theoretical impact on the fidelity of the map. We have overlooked the possibility of a suspended map capable of being folded and unfolded in a different orientation. This solution would no doubt eliminate many of the difficulties discussed above, but, even if technically different from the folding map of the third category, it would prove physically more cumbersome. It would in any case involve the same paradoxes of folding that arise with this third type of map, and would be open to the same objections. 2.3. Transparent map, permeable, extended, and adjustable. Let us imagine that such a map, drawn on transparent and permeable material, gauze, for example, is spread out over the surface and is adjustable. In any case, once the map has been drawn and spread out, either the subjects remain on the territory beneath it, or they climb on top of it. But if the subjects were to prepare the map while it is above their heads, not only would they be unable to move, because every movement would alter the positions of the subjects that the map describes unless we have recourse, once again, to an impoverished map, but further, in moving, they would cause tangles in the very fine membrane above them, resulting in serious discomfort and once more making the map unfaithful. It would assume a different topological configuration, producing disaster areas not corresponding to the PL anometry of the territory. It must therefore be supposed that the subjects have produced and extended the map while remaining on top of it. In this case, we can adduce numerous paradoxes already considered in connection with the previous maps. The map would represent a territory inhabited by subjects who in reality inhabit the map, unless it is a summary, or impoverished, map. The map could not be consulted because each subject could examine only the part corresponding to the territory on which subject and map lie. The map's transparency would eliminate its semiotic function, since it would be functional as sign only in the presence of its own referent, residing on the map. The subjects could not tend the territory, which would deteriorate, making the map unfaithful. It is necessary, then, for the map to be capable of being folded and then reopened with a different orientation, so that every point X of the map representing a point Y of the territory can be consulted when the point X of the map lies on any point Z of the territory, where Z does not equal Y. Folding and unfolding, finally, permit long periods of time when the map is not being consulted and does not cover the territory, and thus allow the cultivation and maintenance of territory necessary to keep its actual configuration always the equivalent of the one depicted on the map. 2.4. Folding and unfolding the map. Certain preliminary conditions must be postulated. I. That the reliefs of the terrain allow the free movement of those subjects assigned to folding. B. That a vast central desert exists, where the folded map can be stored and where it can be turned when it must be unfolded again in a different orientation. E. That the territory have the form either of a circle or of a regular polygon, so that the map, however oriented, will not exceed its boundaries. A 1 map of Italy, shifted 90 degrees, would be spread out over the Mediterranean, and IV. That, as an inevitable consequence, the map will have a central point, lying always on the same portion of the territory that it represents. Once these conditions have been satisfied, the subjects can move en masse towards the farthest boundaries of the empire to avoid the maps being folded up with subjects inside. To avoid potential overcrowding when the subjects are all clustered at the edges of the map and of the empire, we must postulate an empire inhabited by a number of subjects not superior to the number of measuring units of the total perimeter of the map, the parametric unit of measurement being equivalent to the space occupied by one subject in a standing position. Now suppose that each subject grasps a bit of the edge of the map and begins folding it, while retreating further and further. A critical point would be reached at which the subjects would all be crammed together at the center of the territory, standing on top of the center of the map and supporting its folded edges above their heads. A situation aptly termed scrotum catastrophe, as the entire population of the empire is enclosed in a little transparent sac, in a situation of theoretical stalemate and of considerable physical and psychological discomfort. The subjects must therefore, as the folding gradually proceeds, leap instead outside the map and onto the territory itself, where they will continue folding from outside, until the final stages of the folding, when no subject remains inside the sac. But this solution would inevitably produce the following situation. The territory would consist, once folding is completed, of the original terrain, plus an enormous folded map in its center. Thus the folded map, no longer consumable, would prove unfaithful as well, because it is known for certain that it would represent the territory without its folded self in the center. And there is no apparent reason why a map should be unfolded and consulted when it is known a priori to be unfaithful. On the other hand, if the map were to depict the territory with itself folded in the center, it would immediately become unfaithful every time it was unfolded. It could be assumed that the map is subject to a principle of indetermination, for it is the act of unfolding that makes a map faithful, whereas, when folded, it is unfaithful. In this situation, the map could be unfolded whenever there was a desire to make it faithful. There still remains, however, unless we have recourse to the partial, or summary, map, the problem of the position to be assumed by the subjects after the map has been unfolded and laid out with a different orientation. For it to be faithful, each subject, once the unfolding is completed, must assume the position he had, at the moment of its creation, on the actual territory. Only at this cost will a subject resident at point 2 of the territory, on which, say, a point x2 of the map lies, be depicted exactly at point x1 of the map that currently lies, for example, on point y of the territory. At the same time, every subject could obtain information from the map about a point of the territory different from the one where he resides, and about a subject different from himself. Toilsome as it may be, and full of practical difficulties, this solution makes the transparent and permeable map, spread out and adjustable, the best prospect, while obviating any need to settle for a summary map. But this map, too, like the previously mentioned ones, falls victim to the normal map paradox. 3. The paradox of the normal map. When the map is installed over all the territory, whether suspended or not, the territory of the empire has the characteristic of being a territory entirely covered by a map. The map does not take account of this characteristic, which would have to be presented on another map that depicted the territory plus the lower map. But such a process would be infinite, the third man argument. In any case, if the process stops, a final map is produced that represents all the maps between itself and the territory, but does not represent itself. We call this map the normal map. A normal map is subject to a quasi-Russell-Fredge paradox. Every territory, plus a map representing it, can be seen as a normal set. The map does not belong to the set of objects that constitute the territory. But we cannot conceive sets of normal sets. Therefore we should think either of a not normal set, in which the final map is part of the territory it represents, which is false, otherwise it should also represent itself, or of a normal set in which the final map is necessarily unfaithful, as explained above. Two corollaries follow. 1. Every one map always reproduces the territory unfaithfully. 2. At the moment the map is realized, the empire becomes unreproducible. It could be remarked that, with the second corollary, the empire fulfills its own most secret dream, that of making itself imperceptible to enemy empires, but thanks to the first corollary it would become imperceptible to itself as well. We would have to postulate an empire that achieves awareness of itself in a sort of transcendental apperception of its own categorical apparatus in action. But that would require the existence of a map endowed with self-awareness, and such a map, if it were even conceivable, would itself become the empire, while the former empire would cede its power to the map. Third corollary. Every one map of the empire decrees the end of the empire as such and therefore is the map of a territory that is not an empire. 1982. How to eat ice cream. When I was little, children were bought two kinds of ice cream, sold from those white wagons with canopies made of silvery metal, either the 2-cent cone or the 4-cent ice cream pie. The 2-cent cone was very small, in fact it could fit comfortably into a child's hand, and it was made by taking the ice cream from its container with a special scoop and piling it on the cone. Granny always suggested I eat only a part of the cone, then throw away the pointed end, because it had been touched by the vendor's hand, though that was the best part, nice and crunchy, and it was regularly eaten in secret, after a pretense of discarding it. The 4-cent pie was made by a special little machine, also silvery, which pressed 2 discs of sweet biscuit against a cylindrical section of ice cream. First you had to thrust your tongue into the gap between the biscuits until it touched the central nucleus of ice cream. Then, gradually, you ate the whole thing, the biscuit surfaces softening as they became soaked in creamy nectar. Granny had no advice to give here. In theory the pies had been touched only by the machine. In practice, the vendor had held them in his hand while giving them to us, but it was impossible to isolate the contaminated area. I was fascinated, however, by some of my peers, whose parents bought them not a 4-cent pie but 2 2-cent cones. These privileged children advanced proudly with one cone in their right hand and one in their left, and expertly moving their head, from side to side they licked first one, then the other. This liturgy seemed to me so sumptuously enviable, that many times I asked to be allowed to celebrate it. In vain. My elders were inflexible. A 4-cent ice, yes, but 2 2-cent ones, absolutely no. As anyone can see, neither mathematics nor economy nor dietetics justified this refusal. Nor did hygiene, assuming that in due course the tips of both cones were discarded. The pathetic, and obviously mendacious, justification was that a boy concerned with turning his eyes from one cone to the other was more inclined to stumble over stones, steps, or cracks in the pavement. I dimly sensed that there was another secret justification, cruelly pedagogical, but I was unable to grasp it. Today, citizen and victim of a consumer society, a civilization of excess and waste, which the society of the 30s was not, I realized that those dear and now departed elders were right. 2 2-cent cones instead of 1 at 4 cents did not signify squandering, economically speaking, but symbolically they surely did. It was for this precise reason that I yearned for them, because 2 ice creams suggested excess. And this was precisely why they were denied me, because they looked indecent, an insult to poverty, a display of fictitious privilege, a boast of wealth. Only spoiled children ate 2 cones at once, those children who in fairy tales were rightly punished, as Pinocchio was when he rejected the skin and the stalk. And parents who encouraged this weakness, appropriate to little parvenus, were bringing up their children in the foolish theater of, I'd like to but I can't. They were preparing them to turn up a tourist class check-in with a fake Gucci bag bought from a street peddler on the beach at Rimini. Nowadays the moralist risks seeming at odds with morality, in a world where the consumer civilization now wants even adults to be spoiled, and promises them always something more, from the wristwatch in the box of detergent to the bonus bangle sheathed, with the magazine it accompanies, in a plastic envelope. Like the parents of those ambidextrous gluttons I so envied, the consumer civilization pretends to give more, but actually gives, for 4 cents, what is worth 4 cents. You will throw away the old transistor radio to purchase the new one that boasts an alarm clock as well, but some inexplicable defect in the mechanism will guarantee that the new radio lasts only a year. The new cheap car will have leather seats, double side mirrors adjustable from inside, and a paneled dashboard, but it will not last nearly so long as the glorious old Fiat 500, which, even when it broke down, could be started again with a kick. The morality of the old days made Spartans of us all, while today's morality wants all of us to be Sybarites. 1989. How it begins, and how it ends. There is a drama in my life. I pursued my advanced studies as a guest of the University College of Turin, where I had won a scholarship. Of those years I have retained the happiest of memories and a lasting dislike of tuna fish. It so happened that the college refectory remained open exactly 1 hour and a half for each meal. Those who arrived within the first half hour were served the specialty of the day. Latecomers were given tuna. Except for the summer holidays and Sundays, then, over those 4 years I ate 1,920 meals featuring tuna fish. But that is not the drama I refer to. My drama springs from the fact that, while we students had no money, we still hungered for movies, music, and plays. So we would arrive at the theater 10 minutes early and approach the gentleman. What was he called?